But it's important for us to understand that we're talking about two isolated neighborhoods that were built in about 30 years from each other. First, Mishkenot Shalamim, where we're now, was built in 1860. It's an important date because this is when we start counting the years of Newer Jerusalem, the city outside the walls. All right, this is the first neighborhood, not just the Jewish neighborhood, but a neighborhood that was built outside the walls in 1860. In Mishkenot and Yemin Moshe, which we're going to cross to soon on the other side, is a much older neighborhood that was built in 1891, 92. We already had almost 25 neighborhoods in Jerusalem in 1892, which means most of Nachlaot was already built. So your question is, why didn't they build?
But you said it's older? You just said it's
newer. Yes.
What about Arab neighborhoods in Jeddah?
Yes. Okay. This is very interesting. There were neighborhoods, Arab neighborhoods, mostly Muslim, by the way, that were built outside the walls of Jerusalem, but not too many, and not in the beginning. So, for example, the first neighborhood that you have, which is a Muslim neighborhood, built by the Nashashibis, a very famous Palestinian family in Jerusalem. The Nashashibi neighborhood was built very close to Hanabian Street, the streets of the prophets, whereas today the Ethiopian street and the neighborhood, they parallel. This is a neighborhood that was built by the Nashashibis. Starting, first house was built in 1865, but most of the neighborhood was built in the 70s. Right? So there were already about 5 or 6 Jewish neighborhoods outside. And there weren't too many. So if we count, for example, if we count the number of how many neighborhoods were there until, let's say, the First World War, we had almost 50 Jewish neighborhoods and about 10 non-Jewish. Outside the walls. Yeah, so Sheikh Jarrah, Baba Zaga, the Husseinis, the Nashashibis, etc., etc. Okay, but it would go up to 10.
When they moved to Katamon?
Oh, that's much later. That's already the British funding period. Right?
10 of the 50s are Jewish? 10 of the 50s are Jewish?
No, there are 50 Jewish neighborhoods and about 10 non-Jewish. Okay, so and I'm saying this because when we talk about why did they start to leave the old city and build the neighborhoods, the motivation was completely different. The Jews left the old city because they were very poor and they had no money to pay rent. They were not allowed to own apartments and houses, so they had to pay a lot of money for the rent, and it was impossible. And they somehow had to share, living together, 2 families living in one room. That is because the way you pay rent, that was not to pay every month, but to wait for this month that everybody hated, that was called Muharram. You are familiar with the name. It's one of the months in the Hijric calendar, which you have to pay the entire amount of money for the next year to come, 12 months. And it would be a crazy amount of money. Most people would not have it. They would have to, share a house or just live in the streets. So, leaving the neighborhood, leaving the old city and going out was something you had to do at a certain point. I mean, that's the way the Jewish community could not stay inside the old city. It was too packed, too expensive. Yes, and that's interesting because at first they were not allowed. Remember, they were not allowed to own anything. But and this is very important to know. In 1857, right? We're in the middle, more or less the middle of the 19th century. The Ottoman law was changed and allowed non-Ottoman and non-Muslim to buy lands. And it influenced Jerusalem in a crazy way, which is now shown. I mean, try to figure it out. When you look around in Jerusalem today, what you see is a huge city, which is the biggest in the country, and the old city is just a little nothing. It's a 1 square kilometer. I don't know if you guys know it in the city. But if it would have been here for thousands of years until 1980, 1960, you would not see anything outside. I mean, 1860, you would not see anything else. So what we see here is thanks to this change in the laws that were made by the Ottoman. This, of course, had to do, and I hope you guys talked about the Tanzimat, the changes that appeared in the Ottoman Empire in general, capitulations. Does it ring a bell? All right, allowing non-locals, non-Muslims, non-Ottomans to do all kinds of things and also buy lands. I got to tell you that I just said a few words about the Jews going out of the walls and the Muslims and Christians. If you ask me who were those who really understood what's happening here in just went out and built thousands of dunams outside. The Greek Orthodox Patriarch, and they just saw that this is the future of Jerusalem, and they got almost everything to come around. It's amazing because later on, when the British will take over and the Greeks will not have enough money, that has to do with the Russians, with the Tsar that was killed by the people in Russia, and therefore no support, no money support. They went bankrupt and they had to sell lots of their lands. Many of the neighborhoods that were built in Jerusalem during the British Mandate period were built over a Greek Orthodox property, like Rechavia, Katamun, part of Katamun, Talbia, Abutor. Right? So this is another story. We're not here to talk about what happened during the British Mandate period. I just want us to understand that for the Jews, going out of the walls was something you had to do. I mean, it was a must. But for the non-Jews, mostly the wealthy families who lived in the Muslim or the Christian quarter, life was okay. The reason for them to go out did not start. I mean, it didn't start with having to go out. It would be just very wealthy family that will build a castle. That's how they call it. Literally it's a palace, but they would mean villas, nice villas outside the walls, mostly along the northern wall, just because the Christian and Muslim border are right there, right? So you have to go out through Herod's Gate or Damascus Gate and have a nice villa outside that will serve you. You're not going to live there. You live inside the city, but it will serve you during, like, say, the summer when it's very packed and hot. And you want something to go with the kids? They have this villa outside. So here's a villa, another villa, and all of a sudden, in 20 years, you have a new neighborhood. But it wasn't something that was planned together as a community that came out. The houses would be nice villas like you see in Baba Zahira, for example. Very nice Husseini buildings where the American colony, this area, gorgeous houses that were built by private families as a nice villa outside the walls. Okay? Nothing to compare